welcome back to the Maturing Together podcast. My name is Dr. Tamil Yuri, and I am your host for the podcast. If you're new here, welcome. And if you want to learn more about the Maturing Together podcast, please be sure to catch up on our previous episode, particularly the first episode where I introduced myself and talked about the purpose and the ethos of this particular podcast. If you're returning, thank you so much for joining me again. And in today's episode, we are going to be looking at what happens when we outgrow our relationships. In the last episode, we talked about outgrowing our whole life, our whole identities that we may have held in the past. And here we're focusing specifically on outgrowing our relationships. So grab a seat, grab a snack, whatever you need. If you're walking along, gentle steps, and just sort of kind of stay with me because we are going to be looking at this very important topic. I guess the most important thing to start with is when you are changing, when you are healing, when you are growing, your relationships will change too. I'm not coming to this episode just as a psychologist who has helped people with this, who has, identified this theme in my work. I'm also coming into it as a human who has identified this in my own personal life. And there is no way we change, we evolve, we transform that our relationships don't. It's just not possible. As a psychologist, one of the things that I say to people when they come into therapy is to let them know that as they grow, as they heal, as they change, things around them will too. And one of the things that would change is the way in which they experience their relationships. And we don't talk about the grief that can come with this enough. I think as a society, we actually don't even talk about the changes that happen in our long-standing relationships, whether it's letting go. We talk about relationship breakup in as much as romantic relationship breakup. But one thing that we don't talk about is friendships. And I think I will be coming into this a lot more, talking about friendship, the friendship aspect of, like friendship as a relationship and how that can change when we're healing and when we're growing. But it's also, bear in mind all relationships around you will change too. It could be relationships with your coworkers. It could be relationship with work. It could be relationships with family members. I just don't think we talk about this enough. And I am so happy to bring this topic to you. And so, not every relationship can evolve with us. That's what I want us to sit with in in starting to explore this topic is whilst you're growing, whilst you're healing, some relationships just cannot move forward with you. And I think we can be very careless, we can be very loose or not aware in how we move through this particular issue. And it's one that requires sensitivity, proactivity, particularly like it requires special attention because relationships are very, very important. I believe that relationship, it's really, really important that we have supported relationship. It's like an oxygen for our brain. It's oxygen for our healing. It's oxygen for our growth. We need people. We can't navigate life alone. So healthy relationships around us is very, very important. And the other thing that I want you to bear in mind is not about how much people you have surrounding you, but we live a much more richer life when we have different types of relationships. So we're not just relying on our family relationship, we're not just relying on our partners, like in terms of romantic relationships. We have friends, we have community. It doesn't have to be big. In fact, research does show that like you only need 3 to 5 friends. I don't know how valid that research is, but I've heard it quoted a number of times. You only need 3 to 5 friends to have a good quality of life. But the more dynamic our relationships are, I guess, the sort of kind of more improved our quality of life can be. But we can't do life alone. As a trauma therapist, the way that I come into this is relationships are very, very important for healing from our traumas. Why is that? A lot of our childhood trauma happened within the context of a relationship. And a lot of our healing, whether it's, like adult healing, would also take place within the context of a relationship. In fact, it's very useful. I've seen it happen, and I've seen sort of kind of like pivotal transformation happen when we're able to allow our relationships to nurture, to pour back into us things that maybe we perhaps did not get in our earlier relationships. If you've suffered betrayal trauma, it becomes really difficult to trust people. It becomes normal for your mind to work in protecting you by avoiding people. Now, avoiding people is the way in which your mind cope with the trauma, with the wound, with the initial wound of being betrayed. You're scared of people. You're scared of sort of kind of like the external world. Your healing relies on being able to find safe people, to build a new learning that not everyone is dangerous. Not everyone has your bad interest at heart. For people to be able to pour into you, to nurture you, and to create new experiences. So relationships are very, very, very important in our healing journey, in our healing process. And I always encourage it because when we've suffered betrayal trauma, when we've been hurt by the people who were supposed to be trusted, people who were supposed to look after us, people who were supposed to nurture us, when we've had injuries, when these people have injured us, it's a very big wound, especially because the wound is held in sort of kind of like, with our immature mind, like the child mind. And the child mind would build lots of patterns of like ways of trying to cope with life, right? And that could be by people pleasing, more abandoning ourselves, by wearing different masks to find belonging, right? By sort of kind of like, trying to step away from our authenticity to make sure that we're liked. It could also be by avoiding people completely. I'm okay. I don't need anybody. I can't trust anybody because we still have a lot of anger that is pent up, that's built up from being hurt, from being wounded. And so we isolate ourselves. And the more we isolate ourselves, the more we sort of kind of get stuck, in the original wound. And not only that, the more we prolong our suffering because, isolation doesn't bring aliveness. It just sort of kind of keep its preservation in a way in which we don't grow. We just still stuck in the past. So wherever you are on this journey, whatever relationship you're tracking with me, it could be also that our wound impacts like the type of people we go for. It could be in terms of our romantic relationship. So if you've carried wound of abandonment, of rejection, of being bullied, and you've sort of kind of stepped into relationships where you've actually attracted, you know, people who you've attracted people based on your wound. So we could attract people who um we end up being the person we show up by over caring and over giving. We can, like if you've then become a giver, you can just attract someone who is more of a taker. You can attract people who you look after. Like you don't have to see yourself, you don't have to show up because you have a fear of being seen anyway. So you attract someone who actually needs more from you. You attract people who you care for. You're the caretaker within the relationship. So like you haven't really chosen based on what matters to you. You haven't chosen based on your need. You've chosen based on your fears. This doesn't just happen in romantic relationship. It can happen in friendships as well, where we sort of kind of become the caretaker within our friendship group, or we just sort of like, we don't show up the way we are meant to show up within our friendship group. We might tolerate a lot of disrespect because we're so scared of conflict. We're so scared of challenging people. We don't let our friends even see us. They don't even know what our needs are. You might be the type of person who is constantly being the one who organizes everything, who gives everything. You're the one people come to. People just take from you and take from you. Or you might be that sort of like, again, you're sort of kind of like, you self-preserve. You don't give as much. You don't give as much of yourself. You listen more to sort of kind of other people's distress. You don't let people sort of kind of show up for you because you don't show your needs. People can't see you. You don't allow yourself to be vulnerable, right? And you could have attracted people based on this. Our early relationships also don't challenge us necessarily because, we're all kids. If you sort of, if we're looking at sort of friendships here, we don't choose intentionally who our friends are going to be. Often it's a coincidence. Sometimes maybe, yeah, there's intentionality in how you choose friendship in school, but you don't choose what school you go into. Your parents choose that for you, or your caregivers choose that for you. You end up with this set of people, you become friends, and you go to college, you go to university, and you still have these friends. And like, these are period of evolution as well. This is a period of growth. And as you grow, some of this relationship may just not necessarily be fulfilling anymore, not because you've done anything wrong or they've done something wrong. If your needs change, if your sort of kind of like view of the world change, your values change, and these people aren't changing, you're not growing in the same direction, there could be sort of kind of like a growth that is happening. You could be growing apart. You could be growing apart, and you either sort of kind of know it or you don't know it. If you are scared of losing people, you keep just pouring in, and you you don't necessarily exercise your growth. You don't show how you've evolved. You keep tolerating things. If you aren't aware of it, it could be sort of kind of like you just drop relationships. You you don't maintain, you don't nurture your relationship, you don't communicate, you don't talk to people. It might lead to having sort of kind of high conflict type relationship. It doesn't mean that you abandon the relationship, but the relationship isn't fulfilling you. You're not talking about it. You're not talking about how people hurt you, or how maybe your needs aren't being held within the relationship. Another thing you could do is you could start and stop relationship. You're just sort of kind of someone who hops from one relationship to another. So this can show up in different ways. And I think awareness, like everything, understanding ourselves, understanding sort of like, being very intentional in how we show up in our relationship is very, very important. One of the things that can show up here that we don't talk about is the grief of letting go. How do you know that a relationship is no longer serving you? Right. And what do you do? Right. Um, it can be scary to let go, especially if it's someone who you adore, you've sort of kind of known them. And in our society, we often convince ourselves that just because I've known someone for a long time, I have to always know them. This is sort of like, one of the beliefs that I work with people on. I've known them since childhood, we've been friends since childhood. But as adults, you've grown apart, right? And I am not saying that you have to let the relationship go. But if the relationship is no longer serving you, if it's no longer fueling you, if your needs aren't being met, in fact, if it's creating more problems for you, then, your healing depends on you removing yourself from the situation. Again, sort of kind of like the metaphor here, like I used in the last podcast episode, is, the car and the road, and if the road that you're driving on is not serving your car anymore, if it's not serving the journey, if it's not going to take you to where you want to be, you've got to switch paths. So if a relationship no longer fulfills you, if your needs don't get met, if there's abuse going on, if you're not being carried, if it's not fueling you, then it's not going to fulfill you. It's not going to fuel you. It's not going to move you. One of the things that can happen here that we rarely talk about and that I see a lot is just the fact that, change, when change happens within us, our needs, the way we see our need, we become more connected to, what do I need? What do I need from a relationship? What do I need from a friendship? What you need might be different to what I need. I might need, friendships where I feel listened to. I need friendships where, a safe relationship is one where we feel seen, where we feel valued, where there's reciprocity, right? Where there's compassion and there's safety. An unsafe relationship doesn't have those ingredients, right? And not everyone can meet those needs. just because people are on different journey. So if we sort of kind of like, if you've been the type of person that give, and you've attracted people who take, your healing deserves that you come into relationship with people who can give to you as well, because you need to learn how to receive. You need to sort of kind of, you deserve to be poured into. Your healing relies on being poured into. And so this type of relationship, if that's all you have within your friendship, within your romantic relationship, is not going to serve your healing. So it's very, very important that we evaluate the relationship that I am showing up in, the relationship that, the road that I'm on. Is it nurturing me? Is it going to take me to the destination, or is it going to sort of kind of move me towards where I'm going? And that can be one of the reasons. And one of the things that can happen is it becomes really difficult to let it go because it's all I've known. And the grief can be very, very deep. It can be layered, especially when we carry wounds of abandonment. Our wound of sort of kind of like fear of, not belonging, our wounds of being left, being rejected. It makes it really, really difficult for us to sort of kind of remove ourselves. We don't necessarily need to remove ourselves in as much as like, bye, I'm not talking to you anymore. However, we don't have control over how other people show up for us. We only have control over ourselves. If it is a relationship where there is possibility for the other person to hear you out, for there to be a change on their path, from their own, for there to be a change, from them, where like, this person is also into sort of kind of learning, they're into healing, they're into growing. A conversation is useful to be heard there. It's very, very difficult. It rarely happens in friendships. Open communication about how are we showing up, with ourselves. I don't think we pour into our friendships enough as much as we pour into our relationships. And I think, friendship is such a beautiful thing, is a nurturing thing. It's such an environment that can pivot growth and transformation. The same way with romantic relationship, but I don't think as a society we're nurtured, we're encouraged to pour into our friendship the same way we pour into sort of like, marriages, romantic relationships, family relationships. And I haven't even talked about family relationships, because obviously sibling relationship, like, it's a whole spectrum that when you are changing, other people might not be changing. They might be sort of kind of moving in a completely different direction. They might be stagnant. They might not be moving with you. Communication can be very, very difficult. There's increased conflict, less engagement, and you have to evaluate. Obviously, like different relationship, different strategy. You can't leave your family in as much as you can leave them, but you can't. A family will be. I don't want to sort of kind of sound toxic, because just because you're related by blood doesn't mean they're good for you. That is a whole episode in and of itself. But you know, you would always be sort of kind of like attached to family in a particular way, and that can be it can be much difficult to navigate conflicts within that, or to navigate changes that are occurring within a family relationship. With a friendship relationship, it's easier to sort of kind of say you detach. And I think what people do is the detachment, and there is less communication, there's less opportunity for healing, for growth, or to invite this conversation. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. You just withdraw and withdraw and withdraw and withdraw, or you don't, and you just tolerate and tolerate and tolerate, and you're just not getting anything out of it. Wherever you are on this journey, you know I hope you can start to think about the relationships that you show up in. Are they serving you within your friendship? Is there a way in which you need to show up differently? Is your friendship able to tolerate your growth and your healing? The same with other relationships. Your sibling relationship able to tolerate your healing and your growth? Is it opened for you to have conversations about it? I want to encourage moving towards being able to communicate about it. It's not always easy, because we can sort of communicate. Do people understand us? Can people sort of, are people growing with us? I think it can be very, very useful. And I'm going to cite examples of ways in which we can use, like, our relationships to heal, like, talk openly, but it requires the other person willingness and participation in being able to move and evolve with us. Where they're not able to do that, it becomes, a thing where we have to make a decision that this isn't serving me anymore. And how do I detach? How do I move forward? How do I move away? You know, and that can be, it can be easy, it can be messy. But I think it really does deserve sort of kind of like some intentionality. I advocate for, I think it's an opportunity for us to grow as well as humans, to have conversations, with our in our relationships about sort of like, what we are needing from it. To tell people, our needs, like, um, I would like for you to check on me. When I talk to you, I just want you to listen. I don't want advice. To let other people know what we are needing from them, it can be very, very difficult from our perspective, from their perspective. But I think like when we are able to have those difficult conversations, that's where healing and where growth can take place. One of the ways in which I actually encourage using our relationships for healing, and the ways that I have used it, and I have had conversations with some of my friends about this, is actually when we start to recognize, our needs, when we start to recognize our patterns, our friendship can be a very, very useful way of allowing healing, right? If they are safe friendships, right? If they are unsafe friendships, it's a no go. If they are safe friendships, we can discuss like, our journey with our friends. And, I'm actually realizing that I'm not very good at receiving things. And when you compliment me, like I shudder and, I want you to call me out on that. I want you to sort of kind of tell me that it's okay. I want you to remind me to be compassionate to myself. I want to be able to receive more from you. I don't think we have those conversations, but equally, if we've attracted people who aren't able to give us that, and that's what we're needing, then we need obviously to move into relationships where that can be poured into us. And so it's very, very important, and it's very useful to know that we can outgrow relationships in that way, because we've been functioning within relational ecosystem that actually serve to maintain our wound and not one that propels our healing. And so we need a new ecosystem of relationship in order for us to be able to sort of kind of like, move forward with our healing, in order for us to be able to maintain our healing, in order for us to be able to grow and be nurtured. So whatever it is, whether our relationship we've attracted, our the way in which sort of like our wounds have impacted the people we've surrounded ourselves with, our healing needs a new ecosystem in that regard. And that can be the same thing as well, within our family relationships, which can be much more difficult. This is what um, season 2 will be about, is dealing with difficult family dynamics. Will be hopefully another 6 episode where we explore different topics around it. So I'm not going to go so much into that particular sort of topic. But again, family relationships can be very, very difficult. They're very, very important relationships. It's all we've known, particularly our first family, like parents, siblings, whatever the sort of like, whatever family dynamic that you have. And the grief is the same. It's just recognizing that, people are either growing with you or they're growing away from you. And when you are healing, when you are growing and people aren't growing in the same direction as you, there's a loneliness that can come into this, right? Particularly if people are even opposed to your growth and healing, and you will hear things like, oh, she's changed. Oh, you're not the person that you used to. Yes, I'm not the person I used to, because I stopped shrinking myself. I have started to like myself more. I have shed the identity of being the caretaker. I also want to receive. I also deserve to receive. And so when people make those comments, it can be really, really difficult, because our need to attach, and it's a core need, our need to belong, is very scary. It's very scary for parts of us that need them. And so it can be a lonely road. Healing can take us into this very, very dark, lonely road where it can actually feel like we're getting worse because we're losing people, because the people around us, our ecosystem, is made up of people who just have nurtured our wounds, people that have sort of kind of fueled, our that fueled a lot of our injuries. And so when we start to sort of kind of get better, when we start to heal, when we start to mature, when we start to grow, we don't see the world differently. We don't actually value the same thing. And so, it becomes important to detach, right? And if you're moving away, like, however you are doing that, whether you're lessening contact, you're quieter, however you are doing that, there's a variety of ways. Like, there's no easy way, particularly with sort of kind of like family relationship is really, really difficult. One of the ways people get peace is to completely cut off. That's not an option for everybody. And no one wants to cut off. Is a very, very big topic. It's one that comes up quite regularly, on my news feed, on social media, is one that I support people with. If you can't completely detach, you can't completely benefit. You can't show up authentically. And you might still have to show up in those relationships where you can't authentically be yourself. So you have to minimize the exposure that you have within this relationship. I think the family one is one of the most difficult one. And, we're not going to give as much time to it. But if it's not going to sort of kind of like get you to where you need to be, if it's not going to fuel your growth, it's not going to fuel your healing, if it's going to take you back, then it's not for you. If he's going to pour into you, if he's going to nurture you, if he's going to take you to where you need to be. And these relationships, when they are great, like I said, it really, really is transformative. It's very, very useful, especially when we have a dynamic of it. Like, we have our family relationship and we're growing there. We have our friendship and we're growing there. We have our community and we're growing there. It becomes, our lives just richer just because, that's what we need. We can sort of kind of like show up as who we are. We can be poured into. We can have new experiences. We can give ourselves new experiences. We can allow people to look after us. We can look after people in newer ways, and we can grow together, like grieve together. Sort of kind of like have that connection is just very vibrant. It's very fulfilling, and it's very purposeful and it's very nurturing. Relationship when it's beaming with all of those healthy stuff is really great, and it's good for our quality of life, particularly in the society that we live in, where there's a lot going on and there's a lot of tragedies happening around us. Like, community is super, super important. And so when that isn't there, we can really feel it. And it's sort of kind of like the place where we can get to is, do I let go or do I stay? Do I sort of, just stay because I'm scared of losing people? And it's really difficult to make new friends. It's really difficult to make new family members because, they say you only have one that you sort of related to by blood, although you can make family, through sort of, even if they, family don't have to be blood. It's people who pour into you, people who nurture you. But that's very, very difficult in adult life. It's much more difficult to build new communities and make friends in adult life than it is, to do when, as children, just because as children, like, these situations are created for us. We go to school, we go to colleges, like universities, and so like we really are thrown into this situation. But as adults, it's much more difficult because people already have their own established set of group. It's not impossible, but it's much more difficult. And the difficulty can sort of kind of come also from our own fears in sort of, if we still sort of kind of working through a lot around trusting people, about fear of being seen, it makes it really, really difficult to build these new relationships. So that's something to bear in mind, why we might sort of struggle to let go of relationships that aren't serving us. But equally, we start to learn, we start to know your body. The more you heal, the more you listen better to your body, your intuition. And when you are around people, you're just not sort of kind of getting, you're not getting fulfilled. You're not getting sort of kind of like filled up. You're not getting nourished. You're not getting nurtured. The relationship is just not serving you. In fact, it could be draining you. It could sort of kind of like bring more tension, more conflict. And so it's sort of kind of making things worse. And that would require you to prioritize yourself and your safety, because that's the whole point of healing, right? Is prioritizing prioritizing your well-being, focusing on sort of kind of living a purposeful and fulfilled life. And so, like, your body will tell you. It's not rocket science. Like, healing requires you to be connected to yourself, to know better who you are, to pour into yourself, to nurture yourself. And so when you're healing, these things happen anyways, naturally. And so you become aware of it. It's just something that we don't talk a lot about, that this is a process that can bring a lot of grief. And what I encourage is create space for that grief, acknowledge it. You're not alone, get support for it. If you're in therapy or you're thinking about going to therapy, that could be a starting point. Your relationships with yourself has a direct implication on the relationship that you have with other people. The relationship that you have with other people can also tell you something about yourself. It's vice versa. Sometimes, as a therapist, I like to ask people about sort of how they show up in their friendship, how they show up in their relationship, in order for them to sort of kind of start to build an understanding and a picture of, how they show up for themselves as well. So I hope this has been a very useful episode for you. I hope it's sort of kind of like generated some question, maybe sort of reflection, maybe making you sort of kind of think about, certain type of relationships that you're having, or you can relate, whatever it is. I do value engagement, so do engage with me. Let me know in the comment section what's been useful about this particular episode. If you have any questions or anything that you want me to follow up on, do sort of kind of like engage with me on that. Like, you can engage with me through my socials, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, as well. I really hope it's been very, very useful. I want to thank you again for coming along this journey with me. If you stay till the end and you listen to the end, thank you. And hopefully I would see you in the next episode. The next episode will be a new season as well, where there will be a variety of new, topic. Like I said, hopefully we will be exploring difficult family dynamics. And so, yeah, I hope you can come along. Thanks again for listening, and I hope to see you again. Bye bye now.